Imagine a time when religious debates weren't just the stuff of dinner table arguments or Twitter feuds. Back in 325 CE, theological disputes could shake empires, divide entire regions, and turn bishops into intellectual gladiators. Welcome to the Council of Nicaea, the ancient world's version of a cosmic cage match where the stakes were nothing less than eternal salvation. Picture it. Hundreds of bishops from across the Roman Empire gathered in a grand hall, armed not with swords, but with scriptures and fiery rhetoric, ready to duke it out over one of the most fundamental questions of Christianity. Who exactly is Jesus? Is he God? A creation of God? Both. Neither. Believe me, the theological hair-splitting would make modern lawyers look like amateurs. Christianity, like a rebellious teenager, grew up in an environment where it was neither expected nor particularly welcome. Born in the dusty provinces of Judea, it was an upstart belief system that began as a tiny movement following a charismatic preacher who claimed to be the Messiah. His teachings were radical, his followers devoted, and his execution, well, it should have been the end of the story. But instead, it was the beginning of something that would eventually turn the Roman Empire on its head. In those early centuries, Christians were the underdogs of the empire, and boy, did they know it. They huddled together in secret, met in homes or catacombs, and whispered their prayers under the ever-watchful eyes of Roman authorities. At first, the Romans viewed them as a weird Jewish sect with peculiar customs. Talk of eating flesh and drinking blood didn't exactly win them popularity contests. Persecution was always lurking around the corner, ready to pounce with lions, pyres, and crosses. Yet, rather than squashing the movement, persecution seemed to act like divine fertilizer, spreading Christianity even faster. By the time the 2nd century rolled around, things were getting complicated. Christianity wasn't a monolithic entity. It was more like a chaotic family reunion, with everyone shouting over each other about what to believe. Was Jesus a man, a god, or something in between? Did he have divine knowledge he only shared with an elite few, or was his message for everyone? While some Christians, like the Proto-Orthodox camp, worked on shaping a universal faith, others preferred to dive into the mystical and the esoteric. Enter the Gnostics. Think of them as the hipsters of early Christianity, always looking for the hidden meanings behind the obvious. Gnostics believed in a dualistic universe where the physical world was a mistake created by a lower, bumbling deity. Salvation, for them, wasn't about faith in Jesus alone, but about acquiring secret knowledge, gnosis, that would free their spirits from this flawed material realm. To the Proto-Orthodox Christians, this was not just heretical, it was deeply annoying. How could you unite the growing Christian movement under one banner when part of it claimed the material world, including the church itself, was a cosmic oopsie? And then there was Arius, the man who would later make theologians and bishops break into a sweat at the mere mention of his name. Arius wasn't a Gnostic, but he had his own spicy take. Jesus, he argued, wasn't eternal like God the Father. Nope, he was created. There was a time when the Son was not, Arius declared, probably over a particularly heated theological debate. For those trying to hammer out a cohesive Christian theology, this was like a toddler throwing finger paint onto their meticulously crafted mural. By the early 4th century, the Roman Empire itself was a hot mess. Pagan traditions were still dominant, but Christianity was no longer the underground movement it had once been. Emperor Constantine, a shrewd politician if ever there was one, saw its potential. Constantine wasn't just any emperor. He was the guy who painted Christian symbols on his soldiers' shields and then claimed victory in battle because of divine intervention. He wasn't even baptized yet, but he was already flexing his muscles as Christianity's top sponsor. Unity, he realized, was key to controlling his sprawling empire, and a squabbling church was the last thing he needed. So, by the time Constantine decided to intervene, Christianity was a thriving but fragmented force. Think of it as a runaway train with passengers arguing over which station it should stop at next. It was diverse, passionate, and divided by fiery debates. The Council of Nicaea would not just be a theological seminar. It would be the first step toward turning this unruly faith into a well-oiled institution, one creed to rule them all, or so they hoped. As the groundwork for the council was laid, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Would Jesus be officially recognized as God? Would Gnosticism be crushed under the heel of orthodoxy? Or would the whole thing collapse into a shouting match? One thing was clear. Whatever happened at Nicaea would change the course of history forever, and everyone from the emperor to the bishops to the ordinary Christians huddled in their homes knew it. And yet, at its heart, this wasn't just a story of lofty theological disputes. It was a drama, a power struggle, and, frankly, a divine comedy of human ambition and stubbornness. Constantine, the Great, wasn't just any Roman emperor. He was the kind of leader who could march into history books with a sword in one hand and a theological dispute in the other. By 325 CE, Constantine had already cemented himself as a political genius and military mastermind, having united the empire under his rule and introduced Christianity to imperial circles. But let's not be fooled into thinking this was some saintly act of devotion. Constantine wasn't exactly the most pious Christian. In fact, he wasn't even baptized until he was on his deathbed. His faith seemed less about personal salvation and more about political strategy. Imagine Constantine surveying his empire, a patchwork quilt of peoples, languages, and religions, and realizing that the Christians, once huddling in catacombs, had become a force too big to ignore. But there was a problem. This growing faith wasn't exactly unified. Some Christians said Jesus was divine. Others said he wasn't. Some believed he was created by God. Others argued he was eternal. Constantine, ever the pragmatist, must have thought, how am I supposed to rule an empire when even the Christians can't agree on who Jesus is? So, like any good Roman emperor, Constantine decided to settle the matter by calling a meeting. Not just any meeting, a council. And not just any council, the first ecumenical council in history. Constantine invited every bishop in Christendom to Nicaea, a pleasant town in what is now Turkey. It wasn't exactly a free-for-all. Constantine made it clear that this was about unity, and unity meant getting everyone to agree. Or at least, to pretend to agree. Picture the scene. Hundreds of bishops, many of whom bore scars from earlier persecutions under less Christian-friendly emperors, all crammed into a hall, debating the nature of Jesus Christ. Constantine, dressed not in imperial armor, but in a gleaming robe, presided over the chaos like a divine referee. He couldn't have cared less about the finer points of theology, homoousios, homoiousios, homo what now? He just wanted everyone to stop fighting and sign off on a creed that would keep the empire intact. And yet, Constantine wasn't just a passive observer. He played the room like a seasoned politician. When tempers flared, he smoothed things over with a mix of charm and authority. When the debate became too esoteric, he reminded everyone of the bigger picture, the survival and growth of the Christian faith under imperial sponsorship. He even had a hand in shaping the Nicene Creed, the statement of faith that would become a cornerstone of Christianity. Sure, he didn't write it, but his presence ensured that it reflected a vision of unity that suited his imperial goals. The council kicks off with a flourish. Constantine, dressed to impress in imperial robes, opens the proceedings. Now he's no theologian. Rumor has it he got Christology lessons from the palace version of SparkNotes, but he knows a divided church is bad for business. He gives a stirring speech about togetherness, likely imagining the bishops breaking into a group hug. Spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. Right away, the room splits like oil and water. On one side, you've got Arius, the troublemaker from Alexandria, who's adamant that Jesus, as impressive as he is not on par with God the Father. Arius thinks Jesus was created, not eternal, like the world's most divine employee of the month. He has his followers too, and they've brought receipts, complete with catchy hymns, to back up their theology. On the other side, you have Athanasius and his crew, who are basically shouting, "How dare you downgrade Jesus? He's the real deal, co-eternal with the Father." The room brims with tension. You'd think they were debating the empire's best wine, not the nature of divinity. And Constantine, he's sitting there, probably wishing he'd picked an easier fight to referee. Occasionally, he interjects, urging calm, but it's like trying to herd cats. He even invites everyone to dine on imperial food, hoping a good meal might mellow the mood. No dice. The arguments are fierce, The debate's unyielding, and you can bet there's some finger-pointing and raised voices. Maybe even a chair thrown. History's unclear on that detail. One of the council's most dramatic moments comes when someone dares to present a Gnostic-inspired idea. The room erupts in collective outrage. For these bishops, Gnostic beliefs, those esoteric, secret knowledge ideas, are like pineapple on pizza, unacceptable and outright heretical. It's an easy consensus to banish these concepts from mainstream Christianity. Constantine breathes a sigh of relief. At least they agree on something. The showdown climaxes with a vote on the Nicene Creed. By now, Constantine's no-nonsense attitude and the bishop's exhaustion have worked their magic. They hammer out a statement of faith that declares Jesus as homoousios, or of the same substance as the Father. Arius and his supporters, exiled, their teachings condemned. Athanasius and his team, victorious, with the creed enshrined as the official line. But here's where it gets juicy. Not everyone at the council agrees, even among those who sign the creed. Some bishops are just tired and want to get back to their diocese. Others think, we'll deal with this later. Politics, fear, and pragmatism play as big a role as theology in the final decisions. By the end of the council, Constantine's dream of unity is sort of achieved, but the debates are far from over. Arius may be exiled, but his ideas linger like a bad song stuck in the empire's collective head. Meanwhile, Constantine congratulates himself for saving the day, blissfully unaware that this unity will spark centuries of theological arguments, rival councils, and even wars. And so, the bishops pack up and leave Nicaea, clutching their parchment copies of the Nicene Creed and perhaps nursing some bruised egos. Constantine, triumphant but visibly weary, watches them go, likely muttering, "Next time, I'm letting them sort it out themselves."